Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is David and we have a long overdue January wrap up. So I'm going to just dive right into it. This is everything that I finished in the month of January. I'm not going to talk about what I'm reading in February. We're too far into the month to really plan anything out. I'm pretty well enmeshed in all of what I'm currently reading. And who knows, maybe I'll get around to a Friday Reads tomorrow. We'll see. So these are in no particular order. I'm going to start with my 3 ebooks that I finished. I finished a lot more ebooks than I planned. So one of the ones I finished was a last minute end of the month read, and it flew right by. This is The Nemesis Effect by Michael Schotter. This was an ebook provided to me by the author, actually. He reached out to me in an email because he saw me comment on a booktube video by another booktuber saying that it sounded interesting. And he told me no rush, no pressure. I finally got around to reading it. And I did enjoy the book. It's a novella. It's fairly short, 100-ish pages, maybe even less than that. My biggest issue with this book is not the story being told, because it's really interesting, but the fact that the main character is pretty much a passive person being brought along for the vast majority of what happens in there. He's not a mover. He's not making things happen. He's more of seeing things happening, which I guess goes along with his role as an archivist, kind of a chronicler, so to speak. But that really interesting ideas, really good writing. I did enjoy every bit of it. I just found myself wishing a little bit more initiative on the part of the main character to have things happen. So another novella I read off of my Kindle here. This is A Boy and His Dog by Harlan Ellison. And you can see right up there at the top, the year is 2024. So this is what Harlan Ellison back in the day imagined the world would be like in 2024. I had no idea until Liam from Liam's Lyceum read this in January for that very reason and made mention of it. And so I was like, wow, I'm pretty sure I have that on my Kindle. Let me give that a quick read. And it is an absolutely quick read. And it was, I'm keeping track of my top books and my top comics of the year. And, this was in the top half of the stuff that I read in January. This is good. It didn't blow me away. It is never going to be my favorite Harlan Ellison. But it was pretty solid. A little gruff, a little rough around the edges, as Harlan Ellison typically is. But if you are disturbed by sexual references, by violence, he doesn't steer away from any of that. And that's okay. I mean, I thought it added to the story in both of those things. It added to the world and the character. And the not quite as good as A Boy and His Dog, but still really, really solid. I read Under the Moons of Mars. So this is New Adventures on Barsoom. So this is edited by John Joseph Adams. So these are stories not by Edgar Rice Burroughs, but that were written by other people that take place on and around the events of Barsoom. The vast majority of them choosing major players from the Barsoom series and imagining continued adventures. There's a few that imagine things that happen from a different perspective. There's one where Tarzan and John Carter end up meeting each other. It's a fun sandbox to play in, and I imagine that some of the authors had a lot of fun with this. You can tell that some of them, this is an absolute passion project for them, that they were delighted to be asked to write stories in Barsoom. And those are the ones that show. And I think others were filling out the pages. Or maybe just didn't had a deadline coming up and just weren't able to put as much into it. It's a short story collection. There's always going to be ones that fall flat. I found more of them to be okay than to be great. Almost every one of them I found myself saying, I'd rather just reread Princess of Mars. But it was fun. I really enjoyed that. I'm glad I did it because it gave me something to roll into, to where I didn't leave Barsoom completely behind me. I finished a lot of it last year. Ended up, I think, reading 6 months in a row where I read a book in the series. So it was nice to have another month where it hung around. I won't have anything Barsoom this month. So let's next talk about a Barsoom adjacent. Planet of Peril by Otis Adelbert Kline. This was one of my least favorite reads of the month. It was still an enjoyable read. That tells you the month I had. It was a pretty darn good month. I don't think I had a bad read, per se. Yeah, I wouldn't put any of these in the bad category. And Planet of Peril was second worst. A whole lot of fun. Sword and Planet on Venus instead of Mars. Deeply, deeply inspired by Edgar Rice Burroughs, you can tell. And it even says here in the very beginning, though they wrote for the same publishers and were filmed by the same movie studios, Kline never meant to compete with Burroughs. He admired the author, and it was his enthusiasm for that type of story that inspired him to create his own universe of planets of peril, peopled by swashbuckling planeteers and stimulating sirens. So, he was very much a contemporary of Burroughs, inspired by Burroughs, not nearly as good as Burroughs. At least not from this one. I do have one other on the shelf that I probably might get to this month. I mean, these aren't that long. And it would be, again, a good continuation of that type of reading. I did have one book that I'm considering as a reread for the month. And that is R.S. for Rocket. Rereads are not on the list. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't consulted to make 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure my copy of Golden Apples of the Sun that I read early last year, I think, had every one of the stories that was in here. So I don't need this copy of R.S. for Rocket that has the printed on the hardcover picture here. I mean, this is old, it's beat up. But it's Ray Bradbury. These are outstanding stories. Like, even though I knew that I had read all of these. Like, there wasn't a moment where I said, you know what, I should just put this aside and read something else. I enjoyed every minute of it. There's a reason why Bradbury is one of my favorite authors. And his stories, when they are really good, are really, really good. And there are some really awesome stories in here. So, that was a whole lot of fun. All right, so let's talk about my one nonfiction. I don't read much nonfiction because it is such a slow pace to get through them. That in my mind, I'm like, I need to talk about lots of books. I should read something that's a little faster, that takes a little less investment. I'm trying to change that this month. My goal is to have more than the 10 that I have for spaces for my top 10 nonfiction books. I'd like to read more than just the 10 to fill that out. So I read Medieval Iceland, Society, Sagas, and Power by Jesse L. Byock. And I enjoyed the crap out of this. 200 and some pages. This is very much a subject matter that I really, really enjoy. I love reading about the sagas, medieval Iceland, And it does a really good job of blending those two in there. So some historical pieces about medieval Iceland society, as well as a lot of ties in with the sagas. I'm not sure if this is going to be a book that I keep around permanently. I've got other Viking books that I feel strongly about keeping on my shelf. So I may try in March to read my other Biok book, which is Feud in the Icelandic Saga. And then I may send the two of them off to my good friend Vin at Revenant Reads, because I know he'll enjoy the crap out of them. And, if he keeps them after he reads them, great. If he wants to send them back when he's done, sure. I don't care either way. So I'm probably going to do that. And that way he can have those to read at his leisure. Because I know he'll enjoy them. Just like I knew before I went in that I would enjoy them. So one of the, I won't say is a big surprise. I should probably do this one first. It was Ambuary over at Michael K. Vaughn's channel. And I said, you know what? I've got that same volume on my shelf. I read the first two books the previous year, maybe the year and a half before. Jeremy Feet was kind enough to send this copy my way, and I hadn't gotten around to picking it back up. So it gave me an excuse to dive into Amber. My intent was to get through books 3, 4, and 5. I failed. I did finish books 3 and 4, though. So, book 3 was The Sign of the Unicorn. And I think I liked it the least of the first 3 books. It wasn't that it was bad. It just had a lot less happening in it than the first 2 books, for sure. It just felt, a little slow. But in the consideration of a 5-book arc, you would expect that. You got peak and valley, and then where we get to the rising action. And book 4, which is The Hand of Oberon, is freaking fantastic. And that it rolled right into book 5, which I'm in the middle of. When I get done filming, I'm probably diving into that because I want to get back to the Courts of Chaos. I've still got about 60 pages of Courts of Chaos, and these are big pages. Like this is a lot of text on a page. So this page is about reading 1.25, 1.5 pages in a normal size book. So, the book 5 is like 90 to 100 pages. It still takes about what I would think for 120 to 150 page book. So, enjoying every minute of it. I'm probably going to take a break once I get through book 5 to delve into some of the other books. So I've got myself situated where I've got some downstairs books with my reading chair, and I've got upstairs books. And my upstairs books are smaller books that are a little easier to travel with. So, even something like this, sagas R is for Rocket. So not just necessarily these tiny things, but ones that are a little more portable. Whereas I had this upstairs for a while, and I was like, I'm never going to take this with me. It is just going to sit on the shelf, and so it's only going to be read when I'm up there and willing to sit and hold this up there. Whereas down here, I've got my nice reading chair, so I decided to situate it with all my readings. So I've got a fiction book in both places, my bigger fiction book down here. I've got a nonfiction book in both places. Eventually, I will have my bigger nonfiction book down here. I've got to finish my nonfiction book that's down here first. I've got a comic in both places, and my comic is the Conan Omnibus. Yeah, it's good. And then I've got a short story set in both places. Although in this instance, it's poetry down here. So I'm enjoying those. And I'm enjoying Amber tremendously. And so that led me to when I had to pick a short story collection to read when I finished Artist for Rocket, I grabbed my other Zelazny off the shelf. This is For Tomorrow. So this has got 4 novellas by Roger Zelazny in there. And let me tell you, this guy can write. So it's got these 4 in here. It's got the Furies, it's got the Graveyard Heart, it's got the doors of his face, the lamps of his mouth, and a rose for Ecclesiastes. I had just read A Rose for Ecclesiastes in December when I was reading the Science Fiction Hall of Fame Volume 1. So I didn't reread that one. It was fresh enough in my mind, but I read the other 3. And of them, I liked the Graveyard Heart the least, I think. The Furies was great. The doors of his face, the lamps of his mouth was magnificent. It was really good. You can see this is a pretty old, beat up secondhand copy. I'm probably not going to keep this around just because of the condition of the book. I don't feel any need to hold on to it so it can fall apart on me. Probably drop it in a little free library for somebody to check it out. And I know I have at least A Rose for Ecclesiastes somewhere. I probably have an anthology somewhere on my shelf that has the other one that I really liked. And so that brings me to my absolute favorite fiction read of the month. It was the first thing I finished. It hasn't even been close. Sorry, Zelazny. That is Fractal Noise by Christopher Paolini. Wow. If you only remember Christopher Paolini, that name, from the books he wrote when he was a teenager, you are doing yourself a disservice. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars was one of my favorite reads of last year. This is probably going to remain in my top 10. I have a strong feeling it will probably even remain in my top 5 of books I read this year. About 300 pages and really interesting. I would say that you don't even need to read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars before you read this. It's a prequel of sorts. It sets up what he calls the fractal verse. And there's just there aren't that many knowing nods along the way to where if you haven't read the first book, you won't be missing much. Really good, solid storytelling, science, intrigue along the way. The ending has a delightful twist that I did not see coming, that I really, really enjoyed. I'm still thinking about this. And yeah. God, this was such a good book. I can't recommend this highly enough. If you enjoy science fiction at all, this book has convinced me that, yes, like To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, I was pretty sure had shown me that there is at least somebody that is still writing science fiction today that I can really enjoy their new stuff. This confirmed it. So now those of you that care not one whit about comic books, I will sign off from you. Those of you that like to read comics or hear about comics, I did finish 5 graphic novels over the course of the month. So I'm going to talk about those, and I have them all in order. I'm going to try to go quickly because I'm running out of time tonight, and I'd like to get into at least a chapter or 2 of Zelazny before bed. So my least favorite was Cloak and Dagger, Child of Darkness, Child of Light. Not because it was bad, by any means. But it was okay. I mean, it's an origin story. And so it doesn't really do much. It doesn't really grow outside of the lane that you would expect to stay in. I knew nothing about the characters, really, other than kind of their powers going into this. And so it was nice to get to know who they are. yeah, I'm glad I read it. Next, we have the first of the books I finished that Rachel from RK Stumbling Bear sent my way late last year. So I read 1 Week in the Library. This is by W. Maxwell Prince. And I enjoyed the vast majority of this. It's very imaginative. It's got lots of good ideas to where it's this guy in the library. A little bit later on, you see him kind of getting back into the real world. And the very last day in here is what kind of brought this down a little bit for me, because he kind of breaks the fourth wall. He puts himself as a character in here and talks to the main character, he being the author. I guess it works. Not the direction I would have taken for it, but, to each their own. I'm glad I read it. It was enjoyable. It was very imaginative. Has lots of literary Easter eggs sprinkled throughout. So next I read something I knew nothing going into as to what to expect, and that is Gotham by Midnight. So this is volume 1, We Do Not Sleep. I picked it up at a point in time on eBay when I was just bidding a whole bunch of dollar bids to kind of combine on shipping. I was like, you know what? I enjoyed the show Gotham for a couple of seasons while I was watching that. Might have Batman involved in here. Batman does make an appearance. But this is kind of a supernatural squad of people that investigate into the inexplicable. And really, really good. Really interesting setup. I enjoyed every bit of this, but I don't think I'm going to continue with it. Not through any fault of this, but just through a fact of there's just so many that I need to read, so many comics that I just don't have any history with that I want to explore, that I can't see myself dedicating a bunch of time diving into something like that, as interesting as it is. So 2 more. I promise we are almost done. So next we have Batman Black and White. This is one of my recent hauls here around Christmas time. So I really enjoyed the stories in this. All of these are extremely short. And as you would expect, they're done in black and white. And each story is a different artist and writer. So you have so much varying style along the way. And it's just really engaging to see how they interact with not only the medium of it being done in black and white, but telling a story, a snapshot in such a short space, with characters that just a character everybody knows. And some of them, they have people like Joker and Poison Ivy and whatnot making appearances. So the characters you would expect. Others go off in, smaller slices of life, and Batman and Gotham. Really, really enjoyable. This is, I think, volume 1. I think that there's at least 1 or 2, volume 1. So that tells me there's probably more of them out there. It's probably not the best Batman to read, but if you're familiar with Batman and haven't read any of the black and whites, if you've read Batman, you've probably read some of the black and white. It sounds like this is really, really well regarded. I definitely recommend Batman Black and White. I thought that was going to be my best comic read for the month. And then at the end of the month, I grabbed something off the shelf that I'd been avoiding. I'd been dancing around. It was an ex-library copy I had gotten off eBay a while ago. I've taken, the library stickers and stuff off since then. This is X-Men Battle of the Atom. And go figure, an X-Men wins the top spot for comics. But this was really good. It manages to bring together 3 different timelines of X-Men characters. You have present day, you have past, which you can see them right there. You can see the present day featured here, and then future here. And the intricacies, the intrigues, the development of that. Not everything is what it seems, and you're trying to figure out who is actually good and who's actually not so good anymore. It's a timeline when Cyclops is actually with Magneto and a couple of others that have gone kind of their own rogue way as more of an X-Force than the X-Men. He's left the X-Men behind. They have these younger ones are living in the present day. It had me hooked from about the second issue. I had a hard time stopping. Once I started reading this one, it was magnificent. Really, really enjoyed this. You won't understand everything if you're not reading a lot of X-Men, because it makes a lot of references, as any series that's been going a long time will do. But by and large, even though I'm not anywhere near up to date on everything, I was able to pick up and enjoy a lot of what was going on in here. So there you have it. I figured it'd be about 30 minutes, and that's why it's taken so long to do this, because I just haven't had that kind of time lately. But tonight I did, and tonight I wanted to make sure I got this done. So I will catch you later.